October 25, 1944. The waters off Leyte Gulf in the Philippines are heavy with tension. The sun glints off steel hulls hundreds of yards apart. Smoke curls into the sky. Explosions echo in the distance, a reminder that the largest naval battle of World War II is underway. Among the massive ships, battleships, cruisers, aircraft carriers, one vessel stands out for its audacity. A Gearing-class destroyer, the USS Johnston, hull number DD-5537, commanded by Commander Ernest E. Evans, a man as fearless as he is meticulous. She is 376 feet of steel, sleek, fast, and bristling with torpedoes and 5-inch guns. But today, she will face an enemy force far beyond her weight class. The Japanese center force, commanded by Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, is closing. 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and about 11 destroyers. They are veterans of the Pacific War, men hardened by years of battle. And yet, here comes a single destroyer to meet them head-on. Inside the Johnston, the crew moves like clockwork. Every man knows his station. The deck hums with tension. The gunners prepare for the inevitable. Even below decks, the engineers work the engines to maintain maximum speed. Every knot matters when you plan to engage a force 10 times larger than your own. Evans addresses his officers and crew with quiet authority. We'll hit them hard and hit them fast. Torpedoes first, then guns. No hesitation. This is not bravado. It is calculation. Every sailor understands the risk. Outnumbered, outgunned, and deep in enemy waters, survival is improbable. Yet surrender is unthinkable. As the Japanese ships come into range, the Johnston accelerates. The sea spray stings the faces of crewmen at the bow. Explosions from distant shell fire shake the ship. The bridge rocks under the impact of near-miss artillery. Evans steadies himself. He knows that speed and surprise are his only advantages. The destroyer closes to torpedo range. From the main guns, shells whistle toward enemy cruisers. Radar and lookouts report movement. Evans maneuvers the ship with precise turns, weaving through a lethal ballet of fire and steel. The Japanese do not expect a single destroyer to challenge them, and that hesitation gives the Johnston a critical opening. Below decks, the engines roar. Crewmen sweat, hands blistered, from hours of continuous duty. The sonar officer listens to the pounding of distant propellers, Japanese cruisers moving to encircle. Every second is measured, every order executed without hesitation. Fear is present, but it is disciplined, directed into action. Evans issues the command, fire torpedoes. The air is filled with the roar of engines, the flash of gunfire, and the acrid tang of smoke. The Johnston's 6 torpedoes streak across the water, aiming for the largest targets. Somewhere among the enemy, a cruiser shakes violently as one finds its mark. But there is no time to celebrate. The Japanese respond with devastating fire. Shells explode around the destroyer, some too close for comfort. The hull shudders. Crewmen are thrown to the deck. Evans maintains course. One glance at his men is enough. Their courage steels his resolve. This is the moment where a single destroyer will face a fleet and leave its mark on history. In the chaos of Leyte Gulf, where battleships thunder and carriers launch waves of planes, the USS Johnston becomes a David against Goliath, an icon of calculated audacity and raw courage. Leyte Gulf in October 1944 was chaos incarnate. The largest naval battle of World War II was erupting across multiple fronts. On one side, the United States 7th Fleet, including fast carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. On the other, the Imperial Japanese Center Force, a veteran armada under Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, moving to strike at the landing beaches of Leyte and disrupt General MacArthur's invasion. The scale was staggering. Hundreds of ships, thousands of men, and skies filled with aircraft, many armed to the teeth with bombs and torpedoes. Waves of naval artillery thundered continuously, a relentless percussion that seemed to shake the very waters of the Philippines. Smoke from burning vessels blackened the horizon. The sea was alive with fire, steel, and human courage. Within this maelstrom, destroyers like the USS Johnston played a critical role. Fast, maneuverable, and lightly armored, these ships were not designed to face battleships or heavy cruisers head-on. Their primary weapons, torpedoes and medium-caliber guns, required getting dangerously close. But in such a battle, proximity was survival. Firepower alone would not defeat a fleet. Speed, audacity, and tactical ingenuity were everything. Commander Ernest Evans understood this. His plan was audacious: strike the enemy center force before it could reach the invasion fleet. His destroyer, barely 376 feet long, carried 336 officers and crew, yet it would act as a spear point against dozens of enemy vessels. To maneuver through Leyte Gulf, the Johnston relied on radar and visual spotting. Smoke, waves, and the confusion of battle meant that every decision had to be near instantaneous. One misjudged turn, one delayed order, and the destroyer could be sliced in half by a Japanese shell. Crewmen shouted over the roar of nearby guns, carrying out orders with precision born of intense training. Aircraft flew overhead, Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes seeking targets. The fleet's anti-aircraft guns blazed in all directions. For the men aboard the Johnston, the cacophony was constant: explosions shaking the deck, splintered metal flying through the air, and the distant thunder of battleships exchanging fire. Every sailor knew that a single hit could destroy them instantly, yet it was in this chaos that the Johnston thrived. Evans's tactics leveraged speed and surprise. The destroyer zigzagged, closing in on cruisers, releasing torpedoes in rapid succession. Smoke covered its approach, and the Japanese, confident in their numerical superiority, were caught off guard. One torpedo struck a heavy cruiser, causing damage that forced the ship to slow or retreat. Even as the Johnston inflicted damage, enemy shells tore through the water around her. One near miss ripped through the deck, wounding several men. The ship shuddered violently. Fires broke out in the gun mounts, and crewmen fought to contain them while continuing to operate the main battery. Below decks, engineers worked furiously, ensuring that engines maintained top speed despite minor flooding and mechanical strain. This was the essence of Leyte Gulf: multiple simultaneous battles, small and large, each influencing the others. The Johnston's actions slowed Kurita's advance, buying precious time for American forces ashore. While carriers launched air attacks from miles away, and other destroyers engaged in night torpedo duels, the Johnston's single-ship engagement became a critical linchpin in the larger operation. All around, the line between survival and destruction was razor-thin. For every ship hitting its target, dozens of shells could just as easily find them. For the sailors aboard, fear was constant, but discipline transformed terror into action. Orders were executed with lethal precision, maneuvers calculated to maximize impact while minimizing exposure. The Johnston demonstrated how a single destroyer, when commanded with skill and audacity, could affect the outcome of one of the largest naval battles in history. Its role, though small in scale compared to entire fleets, was disproportionate in significance. Each torpedo, each maneuver, each minute of engagement contributed to the survival of the invasion fleet and delayed the Japanese center force. By the afternoon, the Johnston had engaged multiple enemy cruisers, evaded incoming fire, and pressed forward relentlessly. The sea around her was littered with smoke and oil, testament to the ferocity of the battle. And yet, for Evans and his men, the mission was simple: fight as long as possible, damage the enemy, and hold the line no matter the cost. Below the deck of the USS Johnston, the battle was a test of endurance and courage unlike any other. The 336 men aboard were cramped into steel corridors barely wide enough for two to pass. Heat from the engines and guns turned the compartments into furnaces. Sweat and smoke mingled in the air, and the constant vibration of the hull under enemy fire made every step a challenge. In the engine room, men worked in near darkness. Steam hissed from pipes, alarms rang incessantly, and the smell of burning oil filled the air. Every engineer knew that a single mistake could disable the engines, leaving the ship a stationary target for Japanese artillery. Hands blackened with grease gripped valves and wrenches as they fought to maintain speed. On the bridge, Commander Ernest Evans barked orders over the din. His voice cut through the chaos, a thread of clarity in a storm of noise. He coordinated the ship's maneuvers, ensured torpedo salvos were timed precisely, and kept the gunners focused on targets despite the explosions rocking the deck. Evans moved with the calm of a man who had stared death in the face before. He knew that hesitation would be fatal. The gunners themselves faced a relentless onslaught. Japanese cruisers and destroyers were firing heavy shells and rapid machine gun fire. Each man trained for hours, yet nothing could truly prepare them for the intensity of live combat. One crewman described it later. The flashes, the smoke, the screams, it was like being inside a cannon. The Johnston's torpedo tubes were loaded and fired with precision. 6 torpedoes streaked across the water in rapid succession. At least one found its target, hitting a Japanese heavy cruiser and causing serious damage. The explosion lit the night sky with fire reflected in the water. But there was no time to celebrate. Each torpedo fired drew enemy attention, and shells began to rain closer, some striking near the deck, sending shrapnel flying. Below decks, communications teams relayed commands and status updates. Every message counted. Every second mattered. They knew that even the smallest delay could mean destruction. The crew worked as a single organism, coordinated, disciplined, unflinching, because survival depended on unity. Outside, the sea was a battlefield. Smoke and fire from distant ships filled the horizon. Planes strafed targets, dropping bombs indiscriminately. The Johnston maneuvered through this chaos, her hull creaking and shaking, her guns blazing. Members at the gun mounts fought to keep their weapons aimed, reloading as quickly as humanly possible while taking shrapnel and debris from near misses. Evans ordered daring maneuvers to close the distance with Japanese battleships. The Johnston zigzagged through shell fire, weaving between larger ships in a high-stakes dance. Each movement was calculated, but luck played a part. One wrong turn could have meant instant destruction. Despite the terror and physical exhaustion, the sailors' resolve never wavered. They were aware of their numerical disadvantage, yet their mission was clear: delay the Japanese advance, protect the landing forces at Leyte, and inflict maximum damage before the inevitable. Their courage was raw and unpolished, forged in the furnace of battle, human resilience against overwhelming odds. The Johnston continued to press the attack, her guns firing continuously, torpedoes released at critical targets. Fires broke out on deck. But damage control parties fought through the heat and smoke, patching breaches, extinguishing flames, and keeping the ship operational. Every man on board was engaged in a fight for survival and for the success of the greater mission. The sheer audacity of a single destroyer confronting an entire Japanese surface fleet is staggering. Yet in the confined, steel-encased world below, the deck, the human dimension of war, is even clearer. Exhaustion, fear, courage, and teamwork intertwined to create moments of brilliance and heroism. By evening, the Johnston had inflicted significant damage, slowed Kurita's advance, and bought critical time for American forces. The men aboard had fought beyond human limits, driven not by glory, but by duty, discipline, and the necessity of survival against impossible odds. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the USS Johnston found herself surrounded. The Japanese center force had regrouped, aware now that a single destroyer dared to challenge them. 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, and supporting destroyers were converging, bringing overwhelming firepower. Each shell that struck near the Johnston sent shockwaves through the steel hull. Commander Ernest Evans knew there was no escape. Retreat would only expose the invasion fleet and waste the lives of his crew. Instead, he chose aggression, the only weapon a small destroyer had against giants: audacity. He executed a daring plan, closing the distance to unleash torpedo salvos against the largest enemy ships. Every maneuver was risky. One miscalculation could mean immediate destruction. The Johnston fired her torpedoes. One struck the Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano, igniting fires and damaging her propulsion. Another near miss rocked the deck violently, throwing sailors to the steel plating. Evans adjusted course, bringing the ship into a strafing run by Japanese battleship guns. The Johnston's agility allowed her to evade most shots, but several shells tore into the superstructure, killing and wounding crew members instantly below decks. Engineers worked furiously to maintain speed and power. Flooding from near hits threatened the engine room, but damage control parties acted with methodical precision. Fires were extinguished, leaks were plugged, pumps roared continuously to keep the ship from capsizing. Every second of action demanded perfect coordination. Every man's effort was critical. The battle intensified. Evans ordered a close-range torpedo attack on Otago, a Japanese heavy cruiser. The Johnston zigzagged through gunfire, exposing herself repeatedly to achieve optimal firing angles. Shells screamed past, water columns erupting where they struck nearby. The crew's nerves were stretched to the breaking point, yet every man maintained focus, executing his role with practiced efficiency. Meanwhile, Japanese commanders struggled to respond. They were dealing with an unprecedented scenario, a lone destroyer attacking the center of their fleet, damaging ships, and evading destruction. Their numerical advantage was undeniable, but Johnston's aggression disrupted their formations, forcing them to divert fire and slowing their advance toward the landing forces at Leyte. As night fell, the Johnston pressed on. Fires from enemy cruisers lit the horizon, and explosions from distant shells punctuated the darkness. Evans continued his audacious maneuvers, weaving between ships to launch torpedoes, all while taking repeated hits. The ship's guns fired continuously, returning fire against the overwhelming enemy. At one point, the Johnston came within a few hundred yards of Japanese battleships, a proximity so close that each gun blast threatened to destroy her. Evans personally oversaw the final torpedo salvo, aiming to inflict maximum damage before the inevitable end. The destroyer had become both shield and spear, a lightning strike against the Japanese fleet that delayed their advance and protected American landing forces. Despite her ferocity, damage was mounting. Fires raged uncontrollably on deck. Flooding threatened critical compartments. Crew casualties climbed, but the sailors refused to abandon their stations. Each man understood the stakes. Their sacrifice was buying time, protecting thousands of troops ashore. Eventually, overwhelming enemy fire penetrated the hull, rendering the Johnston inoperable. Commander Evans ordered the crew to abandon ship. Life rafts were deployed as the destroyer began to list, steel groaning under damage. Evans went down with the ship, embodying the ultimate act of leadership and courage. The David versus Goliath confrontation ended in the destruction of the Johnston, but not before she had damaged multiple Japanese cruisers and disrupted the enemy advance. Her actions delayed the Japanese fleet long enough for American forces to consolidate positions ashore, directly contributing to the success of the Leyte invasion. The story of a single destroyer taking on a fleet exemplifies extraordinary bravery, tactical brilliance, and the profound human dimension of naval warfare. Against overwhelming odds, a determined crew and audacious commander made history, leaving a legacy that would be remembered in the annals of the U.S. Navy. When dawn broke over Leyte Gulf, the USS Johnston was gone, swallowed by the sea she had fought so fiercely to command. Her loss was total. Over 180 sailors perished with the ship, including Commander Ernest Evans, who chose to remain aboard to coordinate evacuation and maintain order until the final moments. The survivors, roughly half the crew, were rescued hours later by American ships, shivering, exhausted, and haunted by the chaos they had endured. The Johnston's destruction was tragic, yet its impact on the battle was profound. By engaging the Japanese center force, the destroyer delayed their advance toward the American landing forces. This delay allowed additional reinforcements to arrive, strengthened defensive positions, and ultimately prevented the Japanese from disrupting the Leyte invasion. In a larger sense, the sacrifice of a single destroyer directly contributed to the liberation of the Philippines. Commander Evans was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest recognition in the United States Navy. His citation highlighted extraordinary leadership, courage, and tactical brilliance in the face of overwhelming enemy forces. But beyond medals, the story of the Johnston became a symbol of audacity and selflessness. teaching future generations that one determined ship, under the right leadership, could influence the course of a vast battle. The Japanese fleet, meanwhile, was forced to retreat partially disorganized and with multiple damaged cruisers, a testament to the Johnston's effectiveness despite its diminutive size. The battle demonstrated a fundamental truth of naval warfare: bravery, initiative, and decisive action often outweigh numbers and firepower when executed with precision and determination. In naval academies and history books, the Johnston is remembered not for her size, nor for her armor, nor for her firepower, but for the courage and skill of her crew. Each man aboard faced near certain death and chose to fight, understanding the stakes and accepting the risk. Their story is one of human endurance under extreme conditions, of heroism in its rawest form, and of the profound sacrifices that underpin military success. Even today, the wreck of the USS Johnston rests beneath the Philippine waters, silent, encrusted with coral, a grave for the men who gave everything. Divers and historians visit the site as a solemn reminder of the human cost of war. The echoes of gunfire, the orders shouted above the roar of engines, and the courage of a small crew facing impossible odds remain immortal in naval history. The legacy of the Johnston reminds us that heroism is not measured by the size of the ship, the might of the guns, or the number of men aboard. It is measured by resolve in the face of overwhelming odds, the willingness to act decisively when the moment demands it, and the sacrifices made for the greater mission. A single destroyer, a handful of sailors, and one audacious commander changed the course of one of the largest naval battles in history, proving that courage can echo far beyond the confines of a steel hull.